Get pucked. Get pucked. I am Shane of the Always Next Year podcast. This is our Get Pucked segment. That is the Flyers Hockey Flyers Talk segment. Doing this one solo. Jesus Christ, I am doing way too many solo segments right now. Doing this one solo tonight. This is going to be quick, 10-15 minutes. But news for anyone who is listening to this segment for the first time, or if you've been listening to this for quite some time, begin to use the hashtag #GetPucked. So that'll put everything direct. It's something that we follow now. It's something that we're starting. If you have questions, if you have takes, if you have comments throughout games, we will get that. And we will put that into this segment as often as we possibly can. You no longer have to wait for mailbag segments to come up. You don't have to utilize the website for those questions. You don't have to use our email for those questions. You can just pop them right there on the Twitter. If you don't use the hashtag or you don't know how to hashtag, 'cause I'm a social media idiot, you could just tweet directly at us. It doesn't really matter at this point. We will get to anything and everything that you send our way. But we're going to talk a little bit of just the Flyers' position right now, a little bit of post-deadline stuff and what some of those things mean, some of the decisions that were made or were not made, what they mean, or at least how we, as the Always Next Year podcast team, have discussed and feel they make us, or feel that they mean. So just to bring it in, so since since the last week of January, the Flyers are 12-4-1. They are sitting at 70 points. They are currently 7 points out of a wild card spot. Both Pittsburgh and Montreal have 77 points. So let me break that down for you real quick as to what that means. It means that the Flyers will not make the goddamn playoffs, so we can put that conversation to bed. So now we're going to make this make sense, bringing it all the way back into the Jesus Christ, I am blanking on everything today. Trade deadline. There we go. It is really late. So trade deadline came really, really inactive trade deadline for the most part until very, very close to and after 3 o'clock. But the Flyers make their one move. They do eventually move Wayne Simmonds. So real quick, we'll give you our take. I'll give you the Always Next Year podcast take on this. While emotionally and as a hockey fan and as a Philadelphia Flyers fan, it's extremely difficult to see somebody like Wayne Simmonds go. Wayne Simmonds was truly the embodiment of Philadelphia Flyers hockey, and especially what hockey is now. When you do think of Flyers hockey, when you think of what little grit remains in that locker room and what little grit remains in today's game, you think of players like Wayne Simmonds. And while there are certainly players who play with a physical edge, people like a Tom Wilson, they have that aura and that just cloud of negativity that surrounds them and that word dirty. That's not something that's used or utilized when talking about Wayne Simmonds. So for a guy who had so much edge and so much physicality, and just overall tenacity, he played the game the right way. So going over there, seeing him, in the blue and gold in Nashville, it's certainly going to be an adjustment. But it was the necessary move for the Philadelphia Flyers. This is a player that you were more than likely going to lose in the offseason as he was a free agent. What he theoretically will command in terms of contract length and dollars was something that the Philadelphia Flyers should not reach to. That being said, if Wayne Simmonds chooses that he likes Philadelphia enough to come back on a shorter term deal for maybe a little bit lesser and take another discount because he truly likes the Philadelphia Flyers organization that much, I can see a spot for him. Do I believe it's 100% necessary to bring him back? Probably not. But the Flyers do have a bit of classiness and some blind loyalty to anyone who's donned the black and orange sweater. So there's a possibility that it returns. We don't know yet. But moral of it is the difficult decision that came was a business decision, and it was something that the Philadelphia Flyers and Chuck Fletcher needed to do. What he did not do was literally anything else. It was painful. So anyone who knows me, we're going to start with Radko Gudas. So anyone who knows me knows how much I love Radko Gudas. I'm not saying he's a top pair defenseman. He certainly is not. He is an average second pair defenseman and a well above average last pair defenseman, in my opinion. But this year he's been the most consistent defenseman for the Philadelphia Flyers in terms of safe and consistent play. What he's been able to offer in terms of that consistency is something that the rest of our defensemen have lacked. Ghosts has had a down years, no question about it. Provorov, while he's come on in the last 5 weeks now, he has not been what he was. No long-term concerns there, by the way. He's going to be fine. Sanheim certainly picked it up. Haig has just, look, I know people like Haig. He just shouldn't be on the ice. Andrew McDonald is a joke. Should not be on the ice. So what Gudas has brought to the team was that level of consistency that honestly you desperately did need. But you needed to look at this logically as you were entering, and you needed to look at Radko as an asset that could acquire you additional assets that were going to be in your pocket for an extremely important offseason that's coming. Not moving him just seems fucking moronic. It doesn't matter if you weren't even going to get the expected value. I saw that because he's the right-handed stick, I saw people sitting there saying that maybe he could get you a first-round pick. I don't think that would have been the case, but even third-round pick, it's an asset. It's something. It's something you could have flipped in the offseason. It's something you could have packaged with something else. And the acquisition of those assets at this deadline right now for pieces that are not going to be part of your future was so critical. And now the thought of losing certain players for nothing, it's such a problem. So not moving Radko Gudas is such an issue to me. Michael Raffl could have gone almost anywhere. That was anyone that's looking to make a playoff push and was looking for a depth guy who can play anywhere. He's not going to sit there and light up score sheets, but he's a fairly consistent hockey player. He can kill penalties. There was value there. He's not part of the future. This team's not doing anything this year. It did not matter. We won 8 in a row. We won 13 out of 15 games, 13 out of 16 games. It doesn't fucking matter. This team was not good enough after the way that they started to make a run strong enough to get them into the playoffs and to win meaningful playoff hockey games. It just wasn't going to happen. You needed to move these guys. You needed to move these pieces. Not moving Elliott when you had 300 goaltenders, it seems. Playing 8 goaltenders in a season is fucking absurd. Why you did not move him? Anything you could have moved him for. Would have been fine with it. Didn't matter. Throw us a 5th-round pick. Whatever. So those were things that were just completely inexcusable to me. Which leads me to this last part before this is going to be a really quick segment here on the Philadelphia Flyers. But I question Chuck Fletcher's view of the identity of the Philadelphia Flyers and what he envisions going forward. What does he think of Radko Gudas now? When you look at Radko Gudas and you don't move him, what does he now think of the remainder of this defensive group? It makes no sense to me. When you have Radko Gudas, who, again, consistent hockey, this year was a definite bounce-back year after some of the suspensions and difficulties that he had last year and the year prior. He had started kind of distancing himself, there we go, away from that kind of label that he had created for himself. Then he went and hit the hell out of Kucherov on the top of the helmet. But what is it that you see in him right now? Like, are you bringing him back? I'm not understanding that. So you have, if you wanted to replace his physicality, right? If you wanted to replace that, you have Sam Morin who can go in front of the net and clear the crease. He's had some bad luck injuries, but you have a physical presence there that you can replace. If Phil Myers is up, Sanheim's up. I am not a Robert Haig fan. While he flashes the occasional offensive upside and some creativity there, he's never going to be an offensive-minded defenseman, and he's just not good enough to be a quality defensive-minded defenseman. I don't know what his role is on any hockey team. Look, I would go into next season with Robert Haig, completely okay with Robert Haig as a 7th defenseman. Completely fucking okay with it. If he was up in the press box and every once in a while when we knew we needed someone that was going to block a ton of shots, okay. is what it is. Why we're not buying out AMAC at this point, I have no fucking idea. The guy's garbage. Actually, I take that back. So I did read a really good article couple weeks ago. I don't even remember who it was by at this point. But it was pretty spot on. Basically saying and indicating that, when the plays are not happening super quickly in front of Andrew McDonald, he could just focus on making the routine plays. He's an adequate hockey player. He's okay. But when you have to make those split-second decisions, it's something that his brain doesn't tell his body to move quickly enough. And if it does, it tells him to move in 1,000% the wrong fucking direction. That's maddening. So you can't play him. And thankfully, his minutes have dropped, which is good. I think the last game that he was on the ice for, I think he was on the ice for like 8 minutes. But again, he's not part of this thing. Just buy him out. Move on. Just fucking move on. Send his ass down to the AHL. It doesn't matter. So I question with things like that. I question what Chuck Fletcher envisions for the Philadelphia Flyers. By not moving some of those people, and not lining your pockets with additional assets to move, it makes a really critical offseason that much more difficult and that much more pressing. The Philadelphia Flyers, they need to go into this offseason. They have to acquire a legitimate a top pair defenseman, or at the very least a top four defenseman, someone that you got to pair with Provorov. That has to happen. You have to bring. We know that there's a need for center. I've said it for most of the last several weeks where G's been back in that center's role. Often. You have to acquire another center. I do not want 31, 32-year-old Claude Giroux continuing to play the center position. There's a reason why he was as explosive as he was on the score sheets and why his lines were so dominant last year on the wing. That's a much better position for him at this stage of his career. Far easier on the body, too. So acquiring another legitimate center, extremely important. Acquiring a winger who can shoot first, definitely needs to happen. So whether these things come through free agency, whether they come via trades, I'm not sure, and I don't think that Chuck Fletcher knows either. And I'm not saying that Chuck Fletcher's done a horrifically bad job. He certainly hasn't. There have been some moves that, quietly, they are what they are. But I do at this point right now, especially after that trade deadline, have to question how much he knows the direction of the identity of the Philadelphia Flyers moving forward. One thing that I hope that is extremely apparently clear to him is that Scott Gordon is not the answer. The way that he's managed his goaltenders, Elliott coming back and playing, game after game after game. Talbot and the visa issue just is what it is. Carter Hart, the way that he was managed leading up to the injury, that was incorrect. That should have never happened. That at the very least, Scott Gordon cannot be back. Certainly not back in the capacity that he's in. I wouldn't hate it if he went back down to the AHL and worked himself right back into the prospect system and continued to develop our people. Great, no problem. Go down there, stay in the AHL. You need a guy that's going to come in here and that is going to. We all mentioned Q. It's the obvious one, but I expect a really, really thorough look at any coach that is on the market in this offseason to see who offers you the best at prolonging the prime of your aging cores. So your Claude Giroux and Jake Voracek, how you can extend them and continue to excite them about hockey, and how you can kind of bring in that youth and continue to coach them up, but challenge them at the same time, not coddle them. There's that fine line. There's that balance to that process, and how you can make those two different styles of hockey, or different eras of hockey at this point, when you have the TKs and Patricks and the Sanheims and even the Ghosts at this point, even though he's technically one of the most veteran hockey players on the team or on the defensive core. How you get that to continue to match and work in a linear fashion with some of the aging guys, or the guys who have just been here for 6-7 years, like Sean Couturier, who, he may only be 24, but shit, he's played a lot of hockey at the NHL level. So it's how can you get those two groups and classifications of players to work linearly together to get into the postseason and to bring winning hockey back to Philadelphia, because we do certainly have the talent in that locker room. There is certainly the talent that is going to be available in free agency and on the trade market. How you manage that, how you manage the assets that you do have, how you challenge the youth that's going to inevitably come over next year and have that shot. Does Morgan Frost get the 9-game tryout, and does he impress? German Rubstov, who was playing extremely well prior to his shoulder injury, does he get the opportunity to fill that third center role? And if he does, is he the player that we assumed he was when we drafted him? The heir to Claude Giroux, because every single time we draft a center, it's the heir to Claude Giroux. I don't know, but Chuck Fletcher's got a lot to fucking learn right now and a lot to figure out, and he's got to figure out a way to sit there that sells to people like me in the fan base and to people around this city that the culture that he's going to breed in that locker room is going to match that of the effort on the ice, and it's going to be consistent every single night, and there's going to have a true identity that is the Philadelphia Flyers, because right now they don't have an identity. They have Carter Hart, who currently is out, probably going to miss the rest of the year, should miss the rest of the year, honestly. He doesn't need to play any more hockey this year. But you have Carter Hart, and you have a bunch of guys who are just kind of there, and they're all in different directions. It's a problem. So extremely important offseason coming up for the Philadelphia Flyers and for Chuck Fletcher. And I, for one, look forward to it. I'm going to be refreshing Twitter constantly as the season ends, just to continue to sit there and fuel up on good stories. Couple things coming up for the Always Next Year podcast. We will have an article and a podcast show on the top 10 athletes in Philadelphia right now under the age of 27 or 28. I can't remember what we ended up doing. But that'll come out this week. We will have a segment on a review of the Bryce Harper press conference, the introductory press conference from Clearwater. I will be on Brotherly Pod on Thursday evening with Dan the Flyer fan. If you have not downloaded his show and subscribed to his show, please do so. He's pretty great. Probably one of the best Flyer shows that you're going to find. And I think that's all. I think that's all we got. I think we have 2 draft analysis shows coming up for the NFL. We'll be using both LJ and both Connor's draft analysis pieces and what the Philadelphia Eagles may or may not do. But busy week for us, at least in terms of shows and production there. But so continue to follow us on the Twitter account. It's at AMY Podcast. You can follow me on my personal. I am at Shane_Meade, MEADE. You can follow any of our other members of the group. It's LJ is at LJ Harrell 54. Rob is at radio_Rob. Steve is at Schmitty 324. Kev is at Kevman 316. And you can also follow us and subscribe to our website is www.alwaysnextyearpodcast.com. And continue to give in and submit the reviews, 5 stars. We appreciate it. Be as creative as possible. Be as informative as possible. Help us out any way that you think that you can. Again, this content is for you. This is not just for us just to talk for the sake of talking. So we're looking to sit here and give you things and give you your information in the ways that are most entertaining and most informative to you. So any kind of criticisms you guys have, throw that in there too. That's fine. We take all that. We take all that up. After 30 reviews, because I have lost a bet to Rob, I have to post a video of me singing. I think we're doing Wagon Wheel. I can't remember at this point right now. But when we hit 30 reviews, which honestly I haven't checked in a bit, so we may be there. But when we hit 30 reviews, you get to hear my voice in the singing capacity. Not great. Hopefully it's highly entertaining. Other than that, it's going to be it for Get Pucked, the Philadelphia Flyers segment here for the Always Next Year podcast. I am Shane Meade. We're going to sign off till next week.